By popular request, this video will be in podcast format, audio only. There's a lot of things going on in the world right now which will lead to grain market conditions changing, prices adjusting down the road. But to start this podcast, I wanted to talk about the bigger economic picture. While everybody squabbles on social media, there's a reason that gold's $4,500 an ounce. When two sides argue arbitrary things, that's known as internal conflict. And it's usually a sign of a desperate country in severe decline. A world order is established through conflict. The world order as we know it was established right after World War II. The United States won the war, and we had the most gold. Following that, we set up the Bretton Woods Agreement, which made us the reserve currency of the world. Because of this, we were allowed to do things that many other countries weren't able to do. That agreement meant that we had the most strength, we had no challengers, and we had the most money, making us a superpower in the world. But because of becoming this superpower, we also met our own decline. When things become easy, credit becomes easy, you end up becoming lazy. Prior to 1971, we were on the United States gold standard, and trade was settled in gold. Then in 1971, we essentially went broke and defaulted amongst on our gold standard, which resulted in the fiat currency system that we have today taking place. Now, to describe what happened, you had money, being like, what's this say, paper money, like in your wallet. You have gold, and you have collateral. So the total amount of paper money, or equivalents, that could be produced or generated was based on the total amount of gold at hand. And the total amount of gold at hand was valued at $35 an ounce. That is what kept the total money supply in check. Yes, you still had collateral that you used to produce money from, but again, that money supply was regulated by amount of gold. Following 1971, we omitted one key element, the gold, meaning that you had collateral and money. So the money supply only had to be collateral based, no longer had to be tied or bogged down by an overall supply of gold. So in other words, you could just essentially print as much as you want, but banks look at risk assessment, so they'll view it as collateral values to form a borrowing ratio. And when you no longer cap your total amount of money, you can just keep using collateral to borrow more against. And when you borrow more and more collateral, that's why things like your home, which is the collateral, that's why values just keep on going up and up and up. And because there's no gold to tie anything to, you no longer have an intrinsic set value as a original basis. So after 71, we went to the fiat system. We essentially kind of went to a long-term hyperinflation domestically, but not globally. When you're on a gold standard, if you want to expand your money supply, meaning the gold, you take a bulldozer out, you go mining, you find more gold. But now that we're on a fiat system, you no longer have to worry about that. If you guys remember when Trump was voted in, he was going to go open up, the Fort Knox and go do all these gold inspections and all this stuff we heard about on the internet and then never heard about it again mysteriously. If you study gold, one of the reasons that gold is $4,500 is there's a lot of inflow going into other countries. In other words, a lot of other central banks around the world are buying up a lot of gold. Now, had he went and cracked the doors of this vault open and realized we didn't have any gold and we couldn't really cover any of our debts, that could be a big problem, because that means you got no way to cover yourself if nobody wants to buy your money. Once other countries discover that your money is essentially nothing more than toilet paper with printing on it, that's not good news. So if the United States had went in and reevaluated gold, because again, we still stuck on the $35 per ounce mark, we've never changed that, we just suspended the system. So just say we had no gold, and they have to reevaluate it. Say they reevaluated it at $5,000 an ounce to shore us up, quote unquote. At that point, $5,000 an ounce, you just shored up their economies as well, because maybe if their gold flows are larger, and now all of a sudden theirs is also worth $5,500 an ounce, you just became low man on the totem pole. And that likely describes why we never heard about this vault issue ever again. The United States is broke, while at the same time has one of the highest currencies in the world, which is precisely why the Federal Reserve adopted the 2% inflation mandate. The 2% mandate means the US dollar is a safe haven. A safe haven means it's stable, not devalued, because inflation devalues buying capacity. In other words, if our dollar is going to hold any value, it can't lose any value due to inflation reducing buying capacity. And as long as that dollar is viewed this way, in the fact we're the reserve currency of the world, it becomes a stable place for investors or other institutes to buy our debt, buy our bond, and make investments here. It's also what protects average Americans' way of life. A high dollar means that you have a high exchange rate. That makes it really easy to import stuff. And when the dollar goes down in value against other currencies, that makes it hard to import because now you don't have as much buying capacity. And when you don't have as much buying capacity, you have to have more dollars. More dollars, again, is an issue. So that's why the Fed raises rates, which causes no new money to be generated. And since money is debt-based, that means no new debt's generated. That means the supply of money starts to dwindle. The value of it goes up. When the value goes up, what you can purchase and import becomes cheaper. And you end up with a long-term deflation. That's how deflation occurs from globalization. But that's also very hard on things like agriculture, which rely on export markets. Made it real easy to import fruits and vegetables, but it makes it real hard to export other things. Even corn and soybeans may suffer just due to imports and exchange rates. As domestic beans reach a certain price, it becomes cheaper to import beans from, say, Brazil, thus keeping our soybeans at basically a capped level. History also shows that any country that relies upon its dollar in this form of exchange rate doesn't last forever. They essentially kick the can down the road till they can't no more. So part of the decline of agriculture that we're seeing right now is from nothing more than our monetary system. And as producers domestically inevitably go broke, which will lead eventually to a decline in production, at that point you almost become more reliant on bringing stuff into the country, rely on your money again. And when your money becomes your last ditch lifeline, you're on a slippery slope and you're on your way out. There are three major economic carriers. The first being production, the second being service, and the third being financial. As far as being a human being, there are three major factors to making somebody whole in life. The first is good parents, the second is a good education, and the third is equal opportunity. For the reasons I just described, production essentially becomes lost. When production's lost, people tend to navigate towards service work. And over time, even the service economy becomes saturated. Again, the final stage in an economic collapse is solely relying upon your financial systems to shore up the country. And while, yes, the United States still has production, still has services, they are not the growth industries that they once were. We are essentially in the third stage, relying upon our currency. The three stages to a human's life: if you have good parents that love you and provide you a good home and a good stable life, and you go to school and you learn something, and you have a skill set that you can take out into the world. Once you got into that world, can you take that skills and can you apply them? Do you have the opportunity in front of you to do the things that were once there? Now, for a farmer, no, they don't. They do not have the opportunity that once was there. That's, again, because of the things I described in the earlier part of this podcast, as well as we're just in late-stage capitalism. A lot of mergers, consolidation. So for almost all Americans, say 1985 and on, or born 1985 and on, they suffer from a loss of one of those three key elements. And for many, they're just a product of bad environments. So take, for example, a kid that had two good parents at home. Maybe the mom stayed home, dad worked a job, and the mom raised the kid. Well, now inflation hits, and the mom has to go to town. You have what took one income before now takes both parents making income, so the child goes to daycare, and he's no longer provided as good of a home life or as good of an upbringing with the values instilled upon them that they may have once had. Or maybe they become product of divorce because of financial reasons. You end up with key elements of these people's lives being broken. So maybe you take a kid who's came from a single parent broken household. He goes to public school, and they don't do a very good job teaching him, and he doesn't have a lot of skills. He goes out into the world, and he has no opportunity. He can't start the first McDonald's. He can't start a Fortune 500 company. Those things are already established and matured. They don't have the same opportunity. And the lack of one of these things usually ends up bleeding over into politicians. They tend to have a yearning for these things, but may not be able to achieve them or to have them. So they inevitably vote for the person who promises them the world. I imagine that's how Trump got in there, a populist, voted for the politician that was going to ease their problems and provide them a better life, provide them with those opportunities that they seek and desire. Sadly, though, they won't be getting anything resolved. They'll only be getting more of the same or even more problems down the line because most people don't understand the root cause of the actual problem. For example, when Trump gave his speech saying that the tariffs would kick in to benefit farmers, when by simple chart reading actually proves quite the opposite. But farmers who are already down and out, mainly from a long-term rise in the dollar, we're looking for a better solution. The left wants to redistribute wealth, while the right wants to protect wealth. Wealth is assets, meaning if you own land, own a business, own an apartment, whatever it is, that's wealth. And wealth can be converted, meaning borrowed against, for cash. Most rich people are usually just wealthy. Like farmers are very cash poor, but may be very wealthy on paper. When political groups come up with tax plans, often one side or the other, depending on whether they're trying to preserve their wealth to carry it on to other generations, or maybe there's some guy who's just working a job, doesn't know anything but the shirt on his back and lives in an apartment, has a strong desire to redistribute wealth. And you end up in a battle of people that have things and the people that don't have things. And this is combination with our monetary policy. But at the same time, many of those wealth assets would not have reached the values that they are if it hadn't been for tax code in our monetary system. So when you see me analyze and break down videos like Ryan Kelly's all the time, it's very easy for me to do things like that because he's failing to acknowledge the greater picture as I'm describing it in this video. You will never have great amounts of soybean exports when you're not the cheapest vendor. At the same time, you will never have a continuous, stable food supply if you're not part of globalization. When all countries settled their trade in gold, and we were all in the same dollar amount, it made it very easy to be globalized. Well, again, once you remove that key element and you started ballooning asset values, but you're also competing on a global scale fiat system for your commodities, you have global level prices. At the same time, you have domestic inflation. And that's what we talk about on this channel a lot, is these imbalances between what your product is worth or what it sells for and what your purchase price of things that you need are. and that's why we've reached kind of a crossroads here in agriculture now, to where it's in jeopardy. Forecasting the corn market, I think we will see higher corn prices around like 2028, maybe as far out as 2030. At some point in there, I think we're going to see much higher corn prices. Each economic cycle is about 5 to 8 years. Last one started about 2020. Usually when they start, at the beginning front running of it is higher level inflation. Then you kind of go through a deflationary boom period. Eventually the thing ends up going into decline. The whole economy just starts kind of falling apart, and that's about the time you start injecting more capital into it. If you ever watch the Peter Schiff show, he always jokes about the economy is a heroin addict, and the heroin dealer is the Federal Reserve. You shoot up, you feel great, you get all sorts of energy for a while, and it starts kind of slowly running out. So the only solution is to shoot up again. And to stick with his analogy, I think the next round of shooting up is somewhere around 2028, 2029. And I think the catalyst for it's going to be a lot of the energy policies that Trump's doing right now. He's just absolutely hell-bent on destroying oil. Once that oil price cheaper, I don't know if he's going to get it or not, especially if something breaks out in Iran. There's a lot to bear watching right now. But if he is successful with it whatsoever, all he'll accomplish is further suppression of our domestic production, which will inevitably lead to a shortage. And that'll probably happen around the same time that the Fed thinks they have inflation under control and rates have been cut, and they'll likely have been cut due to the fact that the economy's gone to complete shit, and the labor market's headed for a lot more unemployment. They'll cut rates very rapidly, and then at that point again you will see too much money chasing a shortage of goods and a rise in inflation. Usually corn will front run that. Now, corn and soybeans might not get invited to the next party to the severity of other things, just because the markets have been so artificially suppressed due to the wild and exotic trade relations that are ongoing still. I think the Democrats will likely take majority in the midterms. May not be like an extreme overthrow, but I think that they'll have some majority, and I think they're going to make Trump's last 2 years pretty slow and miserable, with absolutely almost nothing happening except for executive orders that get challenged in courts. And again, that's just my prediction. That's not necessarily what I personally want to happen. I'm just trying to make the most logical, calculated forecast as I see it. Now, if you've been watching the social media, you are part of those problematic comments. You see everything from two different viewpoints on shootings to two different viewpoints on the January 6th deal, and all that stuff can have valid points, and I even have my own opinions on those matters, but you never hear anybody talk about a failing aged power grid. You don't talk about China's high-speed rail systems that they're able to build in 5 years, and we can't even pioneer the idea of a high-speed rail. They never talk about the fact that the dollar is the highest in the world that's killing our exports. And all the things that matter, like look at the roads. The roads look like a damn third world country, especially across the Midwest in the state of Iowa here. And nobody talks about it. Instead, they'd rather squabble about men or women in different sports teams and stuff. And when that's what your sole focus is on, and that's what you're at each other's throats, you've just completely lost focus of everything that actually matters and will lead to a production on a national scale increase or decrease. And we're leading to decreases because we're wasting our energy and resources on stupid petty shit that ultimately doesn't matter. To dial this in a little tighter, look at these ICE protests. They're going out and they're making a big spectacle. They've hired more bureaucrats which I don't understand how the right, who's anti-government, actually somehow wants more government. I guess they're happy with paying more taxes or paying for these bureaucrats as long as it fits their agenda. I don't know. The people on the left are just as nuts because they want bigger government. At the same time, they don't want any cops. And while, yes, I have my own opinions on the status of these illegals here, but nobody will bring up the fact that, you know, we have a failed database within our I-9 background system. Won't even talk about it. And they're obviously not making a very big dent in the population of people here illegally. I mean, has anybody been down to the Home Depot lately? I don't see much change. So while everybody's complaining about these things, you know, did your spouse have to go take on more hours working because you weren't making ends meet due to inflation? Did your car insurance go up? Did your house insurance go up? You know, did those inflation adjust? Did your power bill go up? And if it did, why? And there's precisely what I'm talking about, that people tend to lose focus on the things that are really going on behind things they're noticing. Again, it's all due to the monetary policy and tax code and stuff like that that's occurring, making people's lives worse, while they get more riled about something that's not really going to change a whole lot. And that's why I when I do these videos, I try to focus on the bigger scale picture rather than to dial things into some microscopic nuisance question. I get a lot of questions all the time in my comments on here. Well, what do you think of this that so and so passed? I don't even respond to them because it doesn't matter. I mean, for all the shit we see on the news media every day, how come people aren't just rolling around rabidly pissed off that the Glass-Steagall Act was repealed? I mean, most of you don't even know what that even is. I watched the State of the State address. I watched a little bit of it here in Iowa with the Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds. The most popular thing on the social media seems to be abandoned property taxes. That's really being pushed, especially by the right. So Kim Reynolds jumped right on that bandwagon to stir the pot, saying that she was going to try to cap it or take care of it. And there's two front runners for her position, because she's no longer going to run again. But there's a Democrat named Rob Sands who rebutted her with "Show me the math," and there's the likely Republican Randy Fenstra, who said this was a great thing, and is supported by Trump. So he's appeasing the one minority group, and the guy on the left's trying to appease the other way. But at the same time, the guy on the left's not saying, "Hey, show me the math, but by the way, here's how you concluded, where the budget was, and also here's, by the way, what I would do about it." Instead, he's just saying, "Show me the math," saying, "I'm going to sling some mud at you," but not really actually have any answers for the problem. And the guy on the right's just cheering whatever the stupid narrative is as the moment. And the bigger picture is, the people lose track of the fact that the person that was up there giving the speech complaining about it, and one of the reasons the property tax went up, was because of the crap that she passed. And as an independent, I would stand up there if I were to debate the other two and say, the bitch that's bitching is the reason that the taxes are higher. So if you want lower taxes, reverse everything that she did. But can you? Can you reverse it with inflation? Can you reduce teacher pay that already are complaining they don't get enough? Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, you could, but I don't think you're probably going to. I mean, a lot of them wouldn't stick around. We'll probably talk about all that stuff on a separate video or a separate podcast, because I really am contemplating throwing my hat into the ring and just try to run on a common sense platform. So next time you open up your Facebook and everybody's at each other's throats, try to remember this podcast and try to open your mind up to the bigger picture as to what brought us to this point. What brought you to the point where you're angry and squabbling about certain things? Why are you squabbling? Why are you so upset with, why does that really dial into you and your viewpoint? And why do you feel so strongly about it that you're so prepared to fight for your strong viewpoints and beliefs? And as this internal conflict of fighting, as it accelerates, long term, you get to the point where you're almost at a civil war. If you can't compromise, you want to eliminate the other person. And At the same time, you've still lost focus on how the country turned to shit in the first place. You've still lost focus on the things that actually matter. If you're in an abortion argument with somebody that's totally on the other side of the page, and you're so pissed and boiling each other on paper or on social media to the point where you're ready to have a duel, just both y'all drop it and unite and say, God, okay, we're never going to get along on this, but the road out in front of both of our houses is shit, and we should be focused on resurfacing this highway. You know, a lot of engagement really it comes down to how you treat others. When the McDonald's worker screws up your order, does that leave a lasting impression on you? It likely does. One person's action can cause another person's response. That's why we live within a society, commingling, the interaction amongst each other. All of the Trumpers might argue that it should be run like a business. Businesses take advantage of people and capitalize without much regard to their feelings. Whereas a society might band together to come to the best conclusions, what's best for everybody. But as long as there's monetary exchange rates, central banks, and people that want to remain in power, you can never have a true balance. Anyway, these podcasts are easy to make. I enjoyed making this one, made it real quick because I was driving the truck. Don't have the best audio system, but if you guys kind of like these, say so in the comments, and maybe we'll do more in the future. And we'll see you in the next video, which will likely be back to charts.